You have to truly believe in the magic.
What's up, Magic fans? Welcome to Orlando Magic UK's weekly podcast, Penny for Your Thoughts. Today is Friday, the 10th of March, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about Jonathan Isaac, some comments made in the NBA about a certain official from somebody from a different team, and the Magic Hall of Fame. So this morning's Orlando Magic UK injury report had Mikey down as questionable, myself, Gary, and Paul as available. However, we've had a bit of a change during the day. So Paul is now out. Mikey got upgraded to probable and is now actually making an appearance. So we've got the three of us here tonight. So how are we, gents? Enjoying the snow? Yeah? You had a bit of a drive this morning, didn't you?
Bit of a drive this morning, but to be honest with you, there was no snow on the main road I went onto, so most of the drive was pretty good. And logged on tonight, saw the Orlando Magic UK answer to Franz Wagner. Iron Man Mikey Clark sat there refusing to miss the episode, and your smiling face, G, and it just made my day. It could be as cold as it wants, but it's a warm heart that I sit on the podcast tonight.
Wicked, mate. And you feeling any better, Mikey, then?
I don't know about that, mate. I've had 3 days off work, not much snow, just lots of man flu, coughing, sneezing, blowing my nose, living the dream. Yeah, I'm all right. I'll get through it.
Good stuff. And obviously we're hoping Paul gets better, so he has a bit of a weekend. So let's move on. Magic news for the week. So as we finished the episode last week, we had to do a bit of a re-recording because we had a certain section on Jonathan Isaac, and then we found out that he got injured. So the injury is a torn left abductor muscle. Jonathan had season-ending surgery, so that the recovery has basically started already. So firstly, we'd all like to wish Jonathan, a speedy recovery. He's been through a hell of a lot, especially getting back onto the floor this season. So kudos to him. So Mikey, given the news, what are your thoughts and, options long-term that the Magic have now, since this latest setback? Are we in, last chance saloon territory with Jonathan, do you think?
It's very possible. I mean, we're starting to look at JI like Grant Hill 2.0. I think the Orlando Sentinel, Kobe Price, put that out a few days ago, and it does feel like that. When you think JI's played, 147, 148 games in, 5-6 years with the Magic? It kind of feels, now we've got Paolo and Franz, that we're kind of in the stage of moving on from JI anyway. We've seen the impact he's had since he's been back this season, but it's a tough position really, because look, the main options are the Magic could cut him. His deal next season's not fully guaranteed. I think it's 7.6 million. Next season is only guaranteed if the Magic cut him before. I can't think what the date is now. I think it's the start of October. So they could clear up some salary by cutting him, and obviously they'd still have a little bit of chunk still on the salary cap. You could trade him, but let's be honest, what a team's going to be giving up of any significant value to get JI? And on top of that, he's also earning 17 million a year. So it's hard to see any team really taking a gamble on that really. Or do the Magic carry on with him? Which I think feels like the most likely scenario at the moment, when you think, what's he got, 2 more years on his contract after this year? I think we've just got to stick it out and hope that he can get a fully healthy off-season, or get over this latest setback. He's going to have several months to get himself back and prepared for the start of training camp. And then maybe, hopefully, next year, he can hit the ground running and put all of this behind him. But it's starting to feel really unlikely that's going to happen as well. But, I mean, in terms of the front office, I think it's going to end up looking bad on them if they just say, right, we're going to cut JI and move on from him, because they've stuck with him this long. I think it would be a bad look on the organisation if they were to do that. So the only other way you can really see it is if there was a big trade went down in the off season and JI was a part of that because of like salaries and things like that going across and moving. At this stage, I think you've just got to stick with JI, see him out the other side of this latest setback, and hope that he gets back into it next season. I think that's really all we can hope for at this stage.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And obviously, it's not as significant an injury as the other injuries that he's had, and it's a matter of maybe a couple of months as opposed to, possibly a year, except 2 or 3 years maybe, to get back onto the court. And we saw his impact in limited minutes, and even if it's worst case situational, you keep him around for that. So on the subject of injuries, we saw injuries to a couple of other members of the squad. Gary's main man, Admiral Schofield, left the game against Portland with a concussion. I didn't see that, in fact. It was only just reported, wasn't it? Sort of like halftime. Did any of you boys see it? What happened?
I didn't clock it during the game. I just was kind of like, brief appearance, and then they mentioned it on the commentary.
He must have just caught a stray elbow or something like that, because I don't remember him hitting the floor.
Yeah. And then Wendell Carter has missed the last 3 games after playing against the Charlotte Hornets last Friday. The Magic announced this week that Dennis Scott will be honoured to the Orlando Magic Hall of Fame on March the 23rd when the Magic face the New York Knicks. 3D is going to become the 12th member of the Orlando Magic Hall of Fame. So, Gary, what are your memories of Dennis Scott's time in Orlando in his 7 seasons? And who do you think may get in next year?
Okay, so when you sent the agenda through, G, I was thinking, when was the first time I heard of Dennis Scott properly? Like when you can actually remember it.
Yeah.
And it was actually picking up. I know that you see basketball cards and things like that, and you've got an awareness of what was happening in the Magic games. But I remember picking up a season preview magazine, and it said in the preview magazine, and this is not my words, it was the season preview magazine, things that to look out for with the Magic that season. And it was something along the lines of, and I remember this clear as day, expect Dennis Scott to try to prove he is not an overweight standstill shooter and fail. And that was the preview on the Magic.
Wow.
And I will add to this that this was the season that we then went on to go to the NBA Finals. So it worked out well for Dennis Scott. And when you look at like what he did, the current NBA, if you look at Dennis Scott through those eyes, and you shouldn't because it's the context changes, but Dennis Scott and Nick Anderson are making a lot of money in the current NBA because of how their games are and how they translate. And I remember Dennis Scott in the finals run, and he basically was, in my memory, seemed to be a 6th man, and then he displaced Donald Royal out of the team, and he kind of became like part of the starters, so to speak. And I remember watching the games I could watch, and a lot of them were on DSF, which was a German sports channel at the time. And every 3 that Dennis Scott threw up, you felt like it was going in. Like when you see players like Steph Curry now, and you see the bucket just seems as though it's an ocean, and it leaves his hand, and you're like, it's a 3. That's what it felt like. And with Shaq in Orlando, Dennis Scott was extremely valuable because you had Shaq, you had Horace Grant, they could clean the boards up. And if he missed, you had those 2 guys in the paint. And Horace Grant is a big guy, and he didn't look that big when you were watching as a kid because he was stood next to Shaq a lot of the time. But you had 2 really good, like efficient rebounders. And it's worth pointing out that in that NBA, the 90s NBA, Dennis Scott for us was over 40% 3-point shooter in a time when that was pre-focus on the 3 ball. So it's really telling you how good he was. He had the NBA record for 267 threes. And if you're thinking about where he stands with us, well, he still holds the record for 7 threes versus Indiana in game 2 of the Eastern Finals. And that was really, we obviously lost to Houston in the finals. So that Indiana series was really something to hang your hat on if you're a Magic fan. And it was shown that we kind of like arrived. And Dennis Scott was a huge part of that team. And the starting five of the Magic at that time, or what became the starting five when Dennis Scott was officially in it. But the big minutes players were kind of like the Beatles. So like in that, and that's why I'm a Magic fan. The Shaq jersey and stuff. But that time period, having a Magic jersey was like kind of a trendy thing to have in the UK. They were one of the big teams, and Dennis Scott was a big part of that. That is not a Dennis Scott jersey behind me. If you're on YouTube, by the way, G pointed this out, but that was my trick the naked eye. It's a Steve Francis throwback, but I was tributing Dennis Scott and also previewing who I think should be the next member, and that's Dwight Howard. I think for me, he was the face of the franchise. The finals run speaks for itself. 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. He was absolutely jobbed not being in the top 75 players of all time. Absolutely ridiculous. If anyone wants to show that they haven't watched much basketball back in the, like in our day, I would call it, people seeing Rudy Gobert versus Dwight Howard, who's better. It's not even a comparison. It's insane that people think that, lay off crack, if that's what you think. For me, Dwight Howard didn't get the love for how good he was in Orlando in that time because there was a lot of media focus on LeBron and the Cavs and wanting a Cavs versus Lakers final to get LeBron and Kobe. But Dwight Howard stopped that. And the whole NBA system of having basically your three-point shooters was built around Dwight Howard because he was that good at getting the rebounds and dominating the paint and being this athletic freak. And if you wanted to, we're not going to debate it, obviously, but I don't want to debate it, but you could say he's the best Magic center of all time. He's that good. You can make the argument whether it was him or Shaq because of how good he was in a Magic jersey. And really, I think the only argument really about why Dwight Howard wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame was because of how he left. There's a sour taste in people's mouths for what he did. And I know I've been trying to get him to come on the podcast and stuff. So if you're watching Dwight, do feel free to come on. But really what he did in Orlando speaks for itself. And it gives me two questions, really, which were inspired by some things I saw on Twitter this week. And the two questions are really, it's what is the bigger what if? So Marvel's got their Marvel What If series and all that. What's the bigger what if? And they are, what is the legacy for your likes of Dennis Scott, Nick Anderson, Penny, etc., if Shaq doesn't leave? So what is the legacy for that team? Or what happens if Dwight Howard and Tracy McGrady actually played together rather than T-Mac demanding to go out of town? So if we're doing Marvel What If we do Orlando Magic UK What If, what's the bigger what if? So that's my question back to you guys.
My gosh, that's a toughie, that is.
Hold your own.
I got to go back to that 95 team. They were there, they were set, they were ready. Obviously, the McGrady and Howard pairing. Howard was in his first year and he was averaging 14 and 10 in his first year. So of course it would have taken him a couple of years to get up to how good he was, and in the 07, 08, 09 seasons. So the fact that Shaq, did what he did, and it's no surprise that I'm still very bitter about that. If Shaq would have stayed, we'd have won more championships. So that's my.
I would probably agree with that. I think that's a fair shout.
Yeah,
I think for me, because I think if he had been willing to stay, we would have succeeded the Bulls. So that Lakers team that was there, as long as Penny, the injuries hadn't bit, I think we were primed, and we might have even aged. Who knows? Because Shaq became even more dominant. And Penny actually, when Shaq went, we know how he played in that Miami series, for example, when Richie Adubato was coaching. He took it to another level. So it's possible that we could have been the Bulls' biggest challenger, even by just staying together and not being injured like we were when we faced them the following year, in the playoffs, and the Bulls won. So I think it is interesting to think about that. And I do think we would have had a banner. It did ruin my holiday when Shaq left, but I will say the Magic organization as well could have handled that better on that one.
Go on, mate.
I was going to say, I think the difference between the two is if you compare the 95 team to the 2009 team, it was more a case of what if that team had stayed together, what would they have achieved long term? Whereas the 2009 team, or certainly in and around that time, I know you had thinking about adding T-Mac into that. It was more of a case of how could that team have got better to go on and win? Do you know what I mean? That team still wasn't good enough to compete. Whereas that 95 team, we felt like if they had stayed together for a little bit longer, there would have been a year where they would have got it done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, Jordan, retired like 3 years again, in 99 after his second three-peat. And then you had the years when he was New York, San Antonio, the 8th-seeded Knicks in the finals against the Spurs. So, could have been us. But I'd just like to get Mikey's thought. Who would you get inducted into the Hall of Fame next? Any arguments on Dwight? I'd go with Dwight myself.
I would go with Dwight, but I don't think it will happen yet, and I think that's because he's still playing. I think that would be the only reason he wouldn't be next. I would go for Jameer. Jameer Nelson would be my shout. Yeah. Again, if Dwight had retired, different story. But I think there tends to be a case where they've retired for a few more years. Him or Turkaloo. Him or Turk.
Rashard
really.
Lewis.
He's got yeah. I think out of those teams, though, I think Turk and Jameer had a little bit more of a, I don't know, their personalities and how important they were to the team. I think we'll probably put them above. Rashard probably will be long term anyway, but
yeah,
I think for me, in terms of players that are already retired, I would go with Jameer.
Yeah, I mean, Bo Outlaw's another one to consider, fan favourite, ambassador, etc. But before we move on to the next point, I'm going to bring back our little quiz. So obviously, Dennis Scott's going to be the 12th member. Can you name the other 11 that are currently in the Hall of Fame?
Richard DeVos.
Right, okay, I'm going to cross this off my list. Yeah?
Penny Hardaway.
Yeah.
Shaq.
Yeah.
Darrell Armstrong.
Correct.
Brian Hill.
Correct.
David Steele.
Correct.
Nick Anderson.
First one in. Tracy McGrady, yeah.
Pat Williams.
Pat Williams. We're missing 2. One was last year. And one was just after T-Mac.
What's the other guy?
Think of a GM.
Oh, John Gabriel.
Yeah.
John Gabriel was last year. And then we got to think all the way back to the 80s now.
And the other founding guy.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what his name is.
Jimmy Hewitt.
That's the one. That's what I said.
There we go. Well done. The quiz is officially back, boys.
His Master Chief.
Right, so I wanted to touch upon something else that happened in the NBA this week. It's not strictly Magic related, but I thought it was worth talking about given our reference. So Fred VanVleet came out after a Toronto loss to the LA Clippers and called out NBA official Ben Taylor, who happened to give him a technical in said game, and believe he'd done it a couple of times previous this season. Ben Taylor, for me, not one of the bad referees. There's a couple worse, shall we say. And I can't repeat what Mr. VanVleet said because this is a family show. But if you do go on Twitter, I'm sure you'll be able to find it in the videos. So, Mikey, did you like this outburst from VanVleet?
Yeah.
And obviously, yeah, I mean, I like him more now than I did before. And obviously, there's rumours about us, signing him, paying him a lot of money in the summer. Is this something you'd like?
Well, let's start with the rant itself because I thought it was pretty jaw-dropping. I wasn't expecting that when it popped up on my timeline the other day. I was like, he is not holding any punches back. He was going to earn every penny of his fine that he got from the NBA. To be honest, I think it's been a thing that a lot of the players have felt this year. I think G and NBA fans in general have all been frustrated with officiating. I don't think it's been the best year, but that's officiating in general, isn't it? It's not, it doesn't just happen like that in the NBA. But yeah, I wasn't expecting him to go all out like he did. I thought that was pretty surprising, and I actually thought it was surprising that he only got a 30 grand fine for the level that he went to in that post game press conference. But yeah, fair play to him. And then Marcus Smart the next evening. I think he was asked the question by the media, and he said basically Fred VanVleet's answered for all of us on that level, so I'll let him take the fine. But in regards to free agency, I wouldn't go after him personally. I do like Fred as a player. I think he would definitely improve the Magic. I think as he's certainly, he would add something on both ends of the floor. He's a good defender. He's a 37% 3-point shooter. He is having his career worst year, but he's still shooting 34%. But for a guy who's 29, who made the All-Star team last season, I don't think he's the guy we should go after. He would make us better, but I think there's going to be bigger fish to chase, and I think we just got to sit and wait, to be honest, and be a bit more patient. I think there's going to be better players that are going to become available that are going to move the needle more than Fred VanVleet.
And fit the timeline, yeah, like you said.
And fit the timeline.
That's it. So as we record this, the Magic's record stands at 27 wins with 40 losses. We sit in 13th place in the Eastern Conference. Safe to say we're running out of games to get into those play-in spots. So what I'm going to do, first and foremost, is I'm going to get Tankathon up, and I'm going to press the button just to see. I'm sure we'll do this every week now until the lottery. So here we go. Press the button. Not good. Chicago jumped to 4th and Orlando fall to 8th. So, thank God that's not how it's going to end. So let's get into the weekly recap for the 4 games we've played since the last recording. So on Friday night last week, the Magic faced the Charlotte Hornets and won the game 117 to 106. As we all predicted, I think, gents. Orlando were led by Banchero with 31 points and held a lead of 24 points at best time in the game. And the Hornets came back into it. And essentially the starters were recalled late in the game in what should have really been a comfortable win, in my opinion. So, Gary, what did you make of the effort? And are you concerned that we keep letting teams back into the games?
On this one, my concern wasn't so much about letting them back into the game because we're a young team. And I think part of it is we don't know how to win these games sometimes or close these games out as a veteran team would see. So I think a better example is probably the Miami game recently where we should have won that game. And then as we got down to the final 2 minutes, we knew really what was going to happen and how it was going to end up due to experience. And looking at this game here, it was comfortable, but it was not as comfortable as it could have been. But I just think that's the young team dynamic that came out there. The worry for me is really that was without LaMelo Ball, who was like the best player for Charlotte. But by the same token, you could look at it and say, well, we are young. Banchero's puts up 31 points on 6 and 5. Clearly, he's not Rookie of the Year with these numbers, Mr. Giddy. And then we've got Cole coming in, 16 points, did it, like good shooting stats. And Jalen Suggs, 15 and 5. And that's more of what we want to see from Jalen Suggs on a consistent basis. So flipping it, if we took a positive angle, you could say, well, 3 young players have carried us to a win. And that's kind of going glass half full. That's how I want to look at that one. We're a young team who's beaten a bad team. It could have been a lot more comfortable than it was, but it's probably more of a reflection of just what we are at the minute. And not concerned based on that game. I'll give my concerns a little bit further on the game recaps.
That's fine, mate. No worries. So the Magic then faced the Portland Trail Blazers on, was it Sunday or Monday? Can't even remember now. Anyway, we lost the game 122 to 119. Damian Lillard finished with 41 points. Orlando got some decent outputs from the starters, namely Paolo with 26, Franz Wagner 24, with Fultz, Suggs, and Mo Wagner, who was played in place of Wendell Carter, each scoring 15. I got to make a point of this. One thing I did like what Portland did, I mean, obviously we lost, and the Knicks did it a couple of weeks ago, is they were defending a 3-point lead. They didn't let us get a 3-point shot up at the end of the game, played the foul game, and we ran out of time. Now, it's not pretty for to the eye, but it's effective, and I don't know why teams don't do it so much. So, Mikey, what were your thoughts on the performance, and do you like that tactic?
Well, the tactic's certainly situational, isn't it? You've obviously got to be, it's got to be tight. It's got to be a possession or two in it for that to work. You've also got to make sure you've got a player on your team that's going to be making free throws like Damian Lillard, who's one of the best in the NBA. It's certainly a good tactic, but yeah, there's only certain situations that's going to really work. But one positive certainly from this week for me, I know we've gone 1-3. But Banchero and Wagner are both getting over 20 points a night again on a consistent basis. We've seen that all week. And you always, when that happens, you always feel the Magic are going to have a chance to win with our two stars leading the way. Obviously, that hasn't worked out this week, but I do feel this week we've seen again, in a small sample size, how much we've missed Wendell. He's missed 3 games. We've lost all 3. There's not really been a presence at the basket. I know he doesn't pose as a shot blocker, but his positioning, his physicality, his rebounding, his presence in there really makes a difference. And we've seen over the last year or so how he matches up with the better centers in the league, like Joel Embiid, and how he holds them to lower field goal percentages and stuff like that. So he has been massively missed this week, and I do think that's been a big part of it. I mean, Portland out-rebounded us. That was certainly an area that we gave up a few too many second chance points. They shot more, they made more threes than us. And really that's what the game come down to. I think one mistake we certainly made in this game was probably from the Magic's coaching point of view, was they gave Caleb Houston the opportunity, and we've all been advocating for him to play more and get more playing time and get some more valuable experience. But it was a mistake that he was the player that got switched on to Damian Lillard at the end of that game, who drew the foul, went to the free throw line and iced the game. But at the end of the day, I think the defensive side of the ball certainly slipped for us, and I think that's the reason we've lost three straight. We're not rebounding the ball very well. Teams are getting to the basket. I know we're going to talk about some of the other games in a minute, but points in the paint are becoming a problem. And teams just seem to be getting their way with us. And at the end of the day, we're a young team. You might be able to. I mean, you've got Franz, you've got Paolo. Fultz has been getting 20 points a game, but you can't play it and have a shootout against some of these teams. You've got to get stops, and that's been our problem this week. Yeah,
no, it's a good observation there, mate. So we faced the Milwaukee Bucks then. I think that was on Tuesday night. Obviously, they're going to be missing their 2 All-Stars, Jrue Holiday and Giannis Antetokounmpo. I won't lie, going into this game, I was thinking, we can give him a game. Wasn't to be.
You were wrong.
Again. So the Magic are led by Cole Anthony with 23 points, Franz Wagner 21, Paolo with 20. But as Mikey touched upon there, the defense was literally non-existent, with the Bucks shooting 59% from the floor, torched by Lopez, Middleton, Carter, Portis, all the veterans we touched upon last week when we were talking about the game in Milwaukee. They're a very well-oiled machine, and obviously, hopefully they go to the finals from the East, because we don't want to see one of those dirty Celtics there. So, Gary, Were you disappointed as I was with the showing and the lack of defensive intensity?
I think I'll sum it up, G, that if it was any better, it would have been crap. I think that's how I would sum it up. It was awful. I know, obviously, there's still a good team. When you take away, Drew and Giannis, there's still a good team, but we just didn't look likely. That's like watching the game. I was just watching the first quarter. I was like, we aren't winning this game, and I think it was Mikey texted me, and I was like, why am I watching this? It was just sitting there, and I was just it was going through the motions, is what it felt like. Jumping on the back of what Mikey said before, we really missed Wendell. Brook Lopez felt as though he could just get what he wanted inside. He was affecting the game so much and having a big effect the game so much. My worry was what Giannis would have done if he played. We looked sloppy. We looked soft inside. My worry is, firstly, this will prove costly when we're chasing the play-in, because that became a winnable game. When those two players were there, that became winnable, and it wasn't. So I was like, we could get a bonus here. We could go 3-1 this week. That was like how I was looking at it pre-game. My worry as well was when you look at Crowder got 15 points, and Joe Ingles come in with 5 or 6 shooting 12 points, and we made him look unreal. When he was off the bench, he just looked cut above. And he's not a bad player, but I was like, you're like in God territory here when he was playing against us. And, to think those two put up 27 points on us, and then we lost by, 11. And there's loads of things we didn't do well. That was a winnable game.
Yeah. I suppose the only sort of positive is, they put up 123 points.
Yeah.
The offense is there. But obviously, like we've touched upon, it's that the defense isn't where it needs to be. And that's our calling card.
It just didn't look, you're in the first quarter and you're just like, I don't think we're winning this game. And then you watch it the next 3 quarters and it was just unfolding in front of your eyes as you expected it to do. And again, we're a young team. And in a year's time, we might win that game. But just it was very frustrating, because it went from we're probably not going to win that game to, oh, we might win this game, to sitting in the first quarter and going, nah, we're not winning this game. And it was just a little bit frustrating to see. But, we move on. I just think it's one of those where that type of win puts you closer to the play-in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Expect. So never mind.
Yeah, it's always next year. So then we've all caught up from last night's game against the Utah Jazz, who were wearing their yellow highlight marker kit. So the Magic lost by a score of 131 to 124 in what was a pretty frustrating game. And I just got to add, actually, Lauri Markkanen, next time somebody needs to stick one on him, taking that 2 right at the end of the game. It's totally uncalled for. Anyway, the Jazz, I'm really annoyed with him about that. Not that it made a difference. So the Jazz had their way inside the paint of scoring the Magic 64 to 50. The Magic shot themselves in the foot by missing 11 of their 31 foul shots. We got good production out of Paolo Banchero, who scored 26, Markel Fultz with 25, including an absolutely sweet 3-point shot on a step back, which was beautiful. Well done, Markel. And Franz Wagner with 24. Jalen Suggs continued his stellar play with 17 off the bench. So, Mikey, given that our big three, let's call them that, when Banchero, Franz and Markel scored 75 between them, what else do you want to see who else do you want to see in the core going forward? And anything to add on that disappointing loss? Well,
let's talk about the game first. Free throws is the obvious area. I was actually surprised at this because I had a look before we jumped on. The Magic are 16th in free throw percentage this year, which I find really, really surprising because the number of games this year, I feel like we leave so many free throws on the table. I find that really hard to believe that we're in the middle of the pack in the NBA.
You do have Mo Wagner hit like 40 in a row, and then Mark Callow hit 28 in a row or something like that.
But it feels, and I don't know if this is recent, but it does feel like the one game we're hitting the free throws really, we're going really well from the free throw line, but the 3-point shots completely off the rails. Or like last night against Utah, you make 16 of 34, 47% from three, yet you only make 64% of your free throws. It's either one or the other. It doesn't seem to be both. I mean, when you think that we got to the free throw line 10 more times in Utah and we made 3 more threes and you still lost the game, I mean, it's a hard one to take, really. It was certainly another winnable game. Yeah, but for me, that's the two main areas the Magic need to improve on this off season. Is they've got to get better at the free throw line, and we're getting there, which is the positive sign. It's just we've got to make more of them.
Mikey,
go on.
Sorry, just a thought there, because we're always talking about this two-guard situation, and I think G had signed up on this, but I was looking at the Jazz playing, and their two-guard put up 23 points, 8 assists, and he looked almost like Jordan-esque. And I was wondering how you'd feel about giving up wild picks to get the Utah Jazz's two-guard into Orlando, because he looks like a Hall of Famer to me.
Yeah, he's a nobody, I think G would say.
Yeah, well, he looked, Taylor Horton Jordan really performed. And I think
Nobody. Absolute nobody.
Sorry, I disrupted your flow there.
No.
That's all right. It's all right. But yeah, that's the two areas they got to work on this off season. Yeah, it is what it is. But again, the defensive side of the ball wasn't there when it mattered in this game, and that's what it come down to. The core, though, I mean, we talked about this, I think, off air after we finished recording last week a little bit. Honestly, I don't think there's anyone safe outside of Paolo and Franz. I really don't. I think there's a clear, talented young group that includes Fultz, Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, Bol, Wendell, J.I., Chuma, Caleb Houston. I think they've all got a future in the league. I think you could pick several of them and say they're moving forwards as we move forwards, but I wouldn't consider any of them untouchable. And I do think it depends if anybody of significance becomes available in the off season. Yeah, I'd actually like to see us move forwards with everybody for one more year, just to see how far they can take us next season. I think if we can internally improve shooting the three and continue getting to the free throw line and making free throws, we've already seen how much we've improved since everybody's been healthy after that 5-20 start, and what a jump we've made since then. I think if we can have that for 82 games, there's absolutely no reason why this team isn't at the very least a play-in team next year, possibly even a playoff team. So yeah, I would move forwards with what we have already. I think if we can add a couple of players on the fringes who are a little bit better for 3-point shooters, and I think we're probably going to get something like that in the draft as well. That's the way I would like to improve next year, not necessarily turn over half the roster right now, because I think even the young players that are maybe part of the core but maybe not part of the core long term, I think there's enough value in there that they're going to bring us back something in return at a later date whenever that happens. Whether it's the off season, the trade deadline next year, next off season. I wouldn't rush into it. I think this team needs to sort of continue to grow together, continue to improve, and that's the way I would move forwards. What do you guys think?
I think it's interesting, Mikey, because shout out to Fantasy Magic, I believe it was, on Twitter, James Bailey Jr., who said when Markel hit the step back three, I believe it was, about have we seen Washington Markel like re-emerging into the league? The guy who was picked number one. Are we now seeing that? And I think the Magic would be reluctant, very reluctant, to push Markel Fultz out, given how he's played in the last 15 to 20 games. I think he's really shown us something where he's looking. I know we've said before, if he could get a run of games, he could be the guy who becomes the most improved player in the league. I think we all share that opinion. And what we've seen recently from Markel would suggest that maybe, like he's a guy who you would put on that as the third name, because what he's doing is kind of like a De'Aaron Fox level jump. What's happening now, I would say. So I think the front two, we've got to make it fit around Paolo and Franz. And I would kind of push Markel's name into that. And the only way I could see it not being there is if we decided to run the ball through Paolo Banchero, and we were offered a package where Markel Fultz was part of it, and they committed to that idea where he's the ball handler and you got more of a shooter in the backcourt. But I think Fultz might be the third name, where it's like that's the big three, and then add around that, which will happen via the draft. But it's making the parts fit. We've got the core two, maybe three, and then I think it's okay. How do we get what we need around them? And like I said last week on the pod, the perfect guy on paper should have been Mo Bamba. That should have been, and that really honestly annoys me, because if you look at the makeup of the team, a shot blocking 7-footer who could potentially run the floor, he can do it, and shoot from anywhere and put points on the board quick is what you kind of want. That's the dream scenario, and we know
it's funny. It's funny you say that. It's funny you say that, because Paul texted me this morning when he was watching the game from last night, and he said Walker Kessler is what we hoped Mo Bamba would be.
It's just annoying. It's just because we know what Mo Bamba's talent isn't in question. It just hasn't worked for some reason. But on paper, he would have been the perfect. And then you've got four. But it's one of those what ifs, isn't it? But yeah, that's where I'd say it. I think Markel's played his way into the third spot, unless they figure the best way to go forward is with Paolo being the ball handler. That's my view.
I don't know if you saw this tweet from Basketball Forever. It was on my timeline today. Markel Fultz is shooting better overall than Steph, Dame, and Kyrie this season. Having a career year in points per game, field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, assists per game, steals per game, rebounds, and he can still get better. There's still room to improve.
See, I've been saying this for years.
Gee, you know the famous football commentary where it's like, look at his face, just look at his face. When Mikey's reading that out there, I was just watching for you to light up.
like a proud dad.
Yeah, look at his face.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add Jalen Suggs into that. What we've seen from Jalen in the last 10, 20 games, he had an injury hit season last year, but he's shooting the ball a lot better. He's got confidence shooting the three now. And, when he's pulling up for them, you're not thinking, no, Jalen, don't do that. He's hitting them. The guys, David and Jeff mentioned it yesterday. How many times is he on the floor every game? 5, 6 times, jumping for loose balls, getting in passing lanes, getting steals, driving to the basket. I'm really liking what I'm seeing from him. And, if you take out his injury hit season, he's probably nearly played, I don't know, about 80 odd games maybe over the course of since he's been drafted. So that's technically just, about a season. And you put him in the same sort of category as Marcus Smart, who, he didn't start off his career shooting it very well at all. I remember playing Boston. I think he was drafted in the same year as Aaron Gordon. We played Boston, and it was like, yeah, let Smart have that. And he'd airball a couple of threes, but then obviously he's got better. But I think he's in that same mold, and is that dogged guard that you need, for a decent playoff team, just to have. Just disrupt the other team. So for me, I'd put Jalen Suggs in there also. But I mean, there's arguments to put everybody on there, let's be honest, isn't there? So,
sorry, Jay.
Bobby, and I'm sure we'll discuss this probably lots in the off season, when we're doing our, rotations, etc. After we find out who's been drafted. And I know young Gary's looking forward to Grady Dick being drafted by the Magic and trying to fit him in there, Gar.
I can finally identify with. Life for me. But I think though, like, on top of that, we mentioned before about giving up on guys on their rookie contract. and it's not really like the best move to make. And you've highlighted Suggs there and his games, really the court time he's really seen. And then I would look at it and say, well, look at Cole. Like you look at sixth men, like straight away before you get into anything else. Cole's performing in that category. I think David Steele flagged it up where he was fourth in it was flagged up on the broadcast.
Yeah,
best in the East right now, and that's your third year player. And I know it's quite a young thing because Matherin's leading the way and such, but Cole putting up 12, 13 a game off the bench. And it's been, there's been some really big performances and important ones there. Straight away, you're going, well, you've got your sixth man there if that's all that you think Cole is. And that's not knocking it because he should play starter minutes. But then you could put it in there and say, well, if Cole gets the run of games, because he's had a stop-start career where there was no was COVID affected when he was drafted. The Magic blew it up. He's had injuries and things like that. But when Cole Anthony's had minutes and runs of games, he's actually done pretty well for the Magic as well. So that there is that talent question where it's just how do these guys fit? Because, Fultz is having that run of games now, but Cole had this run of games last season, this 20 to 25 game span when he was being talked about as a most improved player candidate and, like maybe a future all-star as well. He's only in his third year.
And he's hit a few game-winning shots as well. Ice in his veins.
You cannot write him off. There's a bunch of players that you just can't write off. We've just got to make it fit.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice problem to have.
It is, definitely. So let's move on and just talk about the week ahead. So we'll be recording our next podcast next Friday, the 17th of March. So we have 3 games on deck. Do we welcome them? No. We face the Miami Heat on Saturday night at the Amway Center, or Sunday morning in the UK at midnight. We then travel to San Antonio to face the San Antonio Spurs Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, again a midnight tip-off, and that then we're up against the Phoenix Suns as we basically continue our West Coast swing. They're going to be missing Kevin Durant, who turned his ankle, I believe, a couple of days ago. That is a Thursday night or a Friday morning in the UK at 2 a.m. So I didn't get Paul's predictions because he was a late scratch. But, gentlemen, Mikey, what are you saying, mate?
What am I saying? I'm going to go 1-2 this week. I'm going to go 1-2. We're going to beat Spurs. Are we getting? I think that's the obvious one. I think Miami, although they've only won 3 of their last 10 games, they're not having their best run, and they're 14-19 on the road. They just feel like one of those teams that we don't really match up well with. They've just added Kevin Love, who's an important vet for that team that come playoff time is gonna be important for them. I just don't fancy us against Miami. The Spurs, I mean, they're in full tank mode. They're trying to chase Houston for the worst, or just Houston and Detroit for that worst record. And what was the other game? I've completely blanked.
The Suns. The
Suns. Oh yeah. I mean, they've already got enough even without Kevin Durant. And that's, I think, a start of a West Coast road trip where we're in the middle of one. It's they're fourth in the West and they're still going strong. So yeah, I'm gonna go 1-2.
Well, what if I was to tell you Miami on a back-to-back? So the second night they face Orlando.
Well, we got to play some defense first and get Wendell back. If that doesn't happen, then I can't see it.
Okay, Gary.
Well, even though me and Mikey's dressed the same tonight, I don't want to be the same in the predictions. So I'll say we'll go 2-1, and we'll beat Miami and we'll beat San Antonio. But
like it.
He's definitely got good fashion sense, and I applaud you tonight with the black blue jersey approach. It's always good.
Good stuff. I was going to agree with Gary, actually. I think we've beat Miami. I think we've done okay with them the last 2 games. Obviously, we just faltered in the fourth quarter. And the fact they're on a second night of a back-to-back, I think the team will be hungry to put right what's been this week where they haven't played defense. So I think we'll win that. I think we'll beat the San Antonio Spurs. And we need to beat the San Antonio Spurs because my little brother Gareth is a San Antonio Spurs fan, and I need bragging rights in the family WhatsApp group. And then obviously Phoenix. Yeah, Phoenix, probably destined to be in the Western Finals at the very least. So we'll probably drop that one. So I'll go 2-1. So here we go. So thank you as always for listening and watching. Please hit subscribe on your YouTube channel, Orlando Magic UK, just to help us try and get to the magic 1,000 subscribers. If you do fancy some shopping this weekend, please click onto NBA Store EU or Fanatics from all of our links. Don't forget to use our affiliate code MAGICUK10 for 10% off your order. So from Gary, Mikey and myself, until next week, go Magic.